Rudins are the first real enemy we encounter after Lancer in Deltarune. They're ordered to fight us by King, and they do so despite not really wanting to. They seem to just be another ordinary forgettable enemy, but if you play the game carefully, you realize that these ordinary enemies know a lot more than they let on. In this video, I'll tell you everything I know about these enigmatic enemies. I'll start off with the Castletown Rudinn. If you explore the Castletown sections, you might know about this Rudinn. In Chapter 2, it welcomes us to Castletown with this dialogue. "Oh ho, welcome to Player's Name Town." Or so I heard it's called. This dialogue is extremely puzzling. How does it know our name? The only other entity which knows our name is Gaster, because of the Vessel Maker segment. It is heavily implied that he is the one behind it due to stuff in the code and naming of audio in the files. Moreover, the Rudinn says it heard that was the name of our town. Who could have told the Rudinn? The mystery gets deeper in Chapter 4. When we go to Castletown, the Rudinn is inexplicably turned blue. It tells us about the love of our town. There are 3 possible states: strong, plain, and cracked. The dialogue for plain love is quite interesting. It says that this is a familiar place, yet you look like you only just got here. From here, let your love grow. All right. It feels like it has some knowledge of the save files from this dialogue. How would it know that Chris looks like they only just got here? Chris has gone through everything that we did not care to go through. They do not show much emotion. So, how did it pinpoint that we just got here on a new save file? Keeping in mind that it has some knowledge of the player, it is not far-fetched to say that it knows about the save files too, and the save files are something only extremely powerful beings know about in both games. Flowey and the player have the knowledge and power to modify them. I don't think Sans knows what they are exactly, as he refers to it as some time travel-y thing, while everyone else just doesn't know about them at all. That aside, the Rudinn literally faded to blue. It tells us that we shouldn't pay it any mind. This is extremely suspicious. Keeping in mind the Rudinn has some strange knowledge about the workings of the world, and shares this knowledge with Deltarune and Undertale's most mysterious entity, Gaster, it isn't too crazy to think this Rudinn will become a gunner, or already is one. To understand why this is a valid conclusion, let me briefly explain Goners to you. Goners are NPCs in Undertale that know too much about how the world works. They are also heavily linked to Gaster, as 3 of them literally name drop and talk about him. The most striking detail about them is how they are completely devoid of any color, and there are NPCs in the game which look like them but with colors. Now, the Rudinn used to be green, but it has now faded to blue. It also knows about the player and save files, something only Gaster knows about in the Deltarune universe. This establishes a connection between the Rudinn and the Gunners. Now, is it already a gunner? Maybe it's a device implanted in Castletown by Gaster to spy on us? This answer falls apart quite quickly, as Gaster seems to be omnipresent as we see in the night fight. Another answer for this could be that the Rudinn is already a gunner, but in a future chapter it will help us in some way. Maybe it could give us some knowledge on the roaring or a bit of lore? Maybe it could train us or give us an item? This conclusion doesn't seem too far-fetched, as Clam Girl in Undertale's Switch version told us that we were going to meet a girl named Susie very soon, turned into a gunner and disappeared. Maybe the same could happen with this Rudinn. I have more thoughts on this which I'll explain near the end of the video. On the other hand, it could be in the process of becoming a gunner. Why does that make sense? Because it could be a good way to show or hint at the process of how something becomes a gunner, and how it's different from those who hold shadow crystals. However, it's possible that normal NPC might be serving this purpose. Anyhow, the Rudinn being in the process of turning into a gunner also explains why it knows about us. I'd also like to mention that this Rudinn and Jewel share very similar dialogues. If your town's love is strong, the Rudinn will say, "Beauty grows in your heart, let's see to a merciful life," whereas Jewel says, "A beauty is joining in my heart in this fight." I also haven't seen anyone talk about this, but I'm pretty sure Gaster's motive is in Jewel's theme. Take a listen. This too is evidence for the Rudinn being a goner. Probably. The Rudinn sprite in the game's files is called SPR NPC Diamond Sleepy. The Dark Worlds are compared to a dream a lot in the game. Even the Rudinn said that Castle Town is a dream that grows with love and care in Chapter 2. Also, in the beginning of Chapter 1's Dark World, we find a sign saying only eyes blinded by darkness can see the way. The Rudinn's eyes are not literally blinded by darkness, but it being sleepy and dreams being something you can experience when you sleep, something is definitely up with this guy. I saw a post submitted to the Daily Toby Fox trivia account on Twitter by an anonymous person saying that for most of Blue Rudin's dialogue, the no-name speaker is used, which is used for most NPCs, so it's fine. However, when it talks about its faded colors, a speaker called Yor is used instead, which has never been used anywhere else in the game. I really wonder if this speaker is gonna pop up again in another time. Anyways, that's not the only Rudinn who has ties to a puzzling and mysterious character in the game. Agroom Rudinns. As if the blue one wasn't enough, we also got a bunch of Rudinns and none other than the Agrooms in Chapter 3 and 4. Why are they here? First off, let's talk about the 7 flying aces. There are 6 aces printed by Chris to cheat at cards. How did they even get into Man Country in the first place? There's a shutout that tells us that before, this dark world used to be Grey Wilderness, but when Tenna came along, it took on the form of a theater and all the darkness became bound to Tenna's contract. Those who did not sign the contract set off for the Farlands, which is Man Country, and became forgotten. One of the Rudinns tells us that they got lost in the couch and ended up there. I feel like the flying aces are strangely rude to Chris. The one that tells us how they came to be tells Chris that if they were any good at counting cards, they wouldn't have needed to cheat. One tells Chris to stop growing up, and another tells him to photocopy another Chris to play with them. I feel like due to the personal nature of the Agrooms and the influence on the Dark World due to the Lightner who creates it, all these dialogues could be related to Chris's personal feelings of guilt and longing. They also say very strange things. One of them tells us that copies are monochrome, but he colored each of us in with care. The copies are monochrome phrase is very interesting. The word monochrome is used for something which is colored in black and white or in different tones of the same color, but most commonly for things in black and white. As we know, the gunners are monochrome. They seem to be duplicates of existing NPCs, which further proves the phrase. The vessel also seems to be a monochrome copy of Chris. Maybe the one Rudinn asking Chris to photocopy another Chris to play with them could be foreshadowing that we'll get to play as a vessel in the future chapter. We also technically brought color into Chris's life by making them interact with people and make new friends. Kind of. Now, I wonder what this phrase could mean for Gaster. As we know from the dialogue of a gunner, Gaster fell into his own creation and was shattered across time and space. The only heavily implied appearance we got of him is the Mystery Man sprite. It's in black and white, and if you're familiar with Deltarune'S theories, you might know about the theory that Gaster was green. But, if you don't know, basically there's a lot of hints throughout both games for this theory, especially if we consider that Gaster is related to Sans and Papyrus. Some of these hints are how the puzzles in Snowdin have an extra useless green shape. In TV World's rank rooms, there is a green door in between a blue and red door, whose sizes also correspond to the heights of Sans, Gaster, and Papyrus. There is a green picture frame with a bone in between Sans and Papyrus's rooms. There's no green crayon in the drawer between 2 rooms in Chris's house, and so on. If we think about what the Rudinn said, it makes me wonder if we are going to save Gaster in a way if we ever fight him in Deltarune, kind of like how we saved our friends in the Asbriel fight. Maybe it's a hint towards defeating him or something. Or maybe some meta thing about how us crazy fans overanalyzed Gaster to teeny tiny bits and also made a bunch of stories for him with fanfiction and art. Honestly, I don't really know what I'm getting at here. In Undertale's 10th anniversary live streams, Toby and the Fangamer staff played through the entirety of Undertale. In these we saw some new areas and things, but most notably, we got a colored version of Gaster's door, and it looked exactly like the doors in Sans and Papyrus's house. This might imply that Toby has the original Undertale, while we got copies. Why do these things have so much relevance even outside of their damn game? Overall, this phrase has a lot of implications for a bunch of different theories, and I can't really say it all in this video. I just find it crazy how an anime like this can have so much relevance. The Pippins seem to know about the flying aces a bit, but they're probably just serving as hints and nothing too deep. Also, the rank room with the bomb machine, the weird December thing, and the Gaster imagery also has little hints for the egg room for the chapter. There's a musical postcard by the flying aces there too, inviting us to the Forgotten Island. Holy shit! They're linked to Daz's disappearance. They're also related to Gaster who kidnapped her. Oh god. And also it's a musical postcard. You know who has links to musical instruments and music? Daz. Uh-oh. Oh god, these guys are way too suspicious. This is not my own observation, but while scrolling Twitter the other day, I found this post by Lazy Nick 5. I found it really interesting, so I asked if I could put it into my video. They said that the salmon flying aces parallel the salmon fallen humans in Undertale, with something happening to the seventh ones and them going missing. They also mentioned that Asgore's shop has salmon flowers too, and they bring up that Frisk's power of determination is brought up throughout various points in the game. They said that this is a direct hint to Frisk having relevancy in Deltarune. I also saw a post by a user called Tiny Hater, where she said that this sign in the waterfall area of Undertale and the salmon flying aces being copies might have a link to Gaster. People in the comments of this post said that it's possible this could mean that Gaster tried to copy a human soul during his time as a royal scientist, but it didn't work out. One of the flying aces says it's trying to look as far as it can, but it doesn't look too good. Then it tells us that it senses nothing but evil from the place it's trying to look. In Spamton and Neil's fight in the segment where his defense is insanely high, he repeatedly tells us that calling our friends for help is futile. This entire segment feels like he's projecting what happened to him onto Chris, considering that the mysterious benefactor that used to call him seems to have left after he ran away from TV World, how the Addisons dislike him, and he's implied to have attempted to call Tenna, but his number was changed. Then, at some point, he says that you lost it when you tried to see too far. Spamton seems to have gone crazy due to finding out about the prophecy. Losing it when he tried to see too far might mean that in his hustle for fame, he tried to look deeper and deeper, or perhaps the benefactor told him something, which made him realize that no matter what he does, it'll all end the same. But despite that, he still tries and tries to change something, no matter what it takes, even if nobody's helping him. Going back to what the little Rudinn said, when we look into its binoculars, we see a grey grassy area. Man Country has green grass, Gunners are grayscale. Keeping in mind what Spamton said and how it possibly links to the prophecy, maybe the Rudinn is looking into the future? It doesn't look too good. Maybe this is something related to the roaring. As Ralsei said, the land will be enveloped in devastation when the roaring starts. Flying aces aside, there is another little Rudinn in the Chapter 4 rag room. It also talks strange, speaking to Chris as if they're the doctor seeing patients. It also tells us it's a secretary, most likely for the Forgotten Man. What I find interesting is how it tells us that knockoffs don't have the right to complain, after telling us it's quite small for a secretary. Considering the nature of this egg room, it might be a personal doubt of Chris's. Chris is working with the Knight, as implied from some details in the game, such as Chris being knighted by the Knight, not doing much damage to them, not getting swooned by them, not attacking the Knight when they get the chance, and also possibly talking to them on the phone. However, that might just be Carol. A secretary is someone who is employed to assist with correspondence, appointments, and administrative tasks. In Chapter 3, it seems that the Knight needed a sacrifice, and Chris was instructed to keep Susie and Ralsei busy. To keep them busy, Chris must have made a deal with Tenna, as implied by his dialogue in the sword route. Obviously, The knight would abduct Toriel for sacrifice, but Chris didn't want that. So, at first they tried to tell Undyne about Dark Worlds, but when she didn't listen, they instead slashed the tires of their mom's car, which caused her to call Undyne. Then, before they went into the Dark World, they opened their front door a little so that Undyne would see the Dark World smoke and come inside, thus getting abducted in place of Toriel. Keeping all of this in mind, I wonder if Chris feels like they cannot keep up with the Knight's demands and feels bad for working with them. But there's some underlying reason why they continue to work with them and betray their friends. That's why knockoffs don't have the right to complain. I also wonder if this phrase has a connection to how they're the only human in Hometown and how they pretended to be a monster as a kid. Maybe they feel like they have no right to complain about any issues they have to their parents as they're already divorced, Asriel's at university, Toriel has work, Asgard's financially struggling, and they don't want to add any more burden onto them. Prototype enemies. Every game has test enemies. Usually they aren't much to think about, but the test enemies in Deltarune have some very strange wording used for them. Let's start off with Chapter 1's G-Body. It has the appearance of a rudin. This is probably due to them being the first enemy, but wouldn't it make more sense for a test enemy to have a very sketchy and low-effort sprite, or the sprite of the Ralsei dummy, as that's a real first encounter? We already have some extremely early test sprites, so why do these enemies use rudins in particular? The name of this enemy is very peculiar, G-Body. It has naming similar to that of parts of the vessel in the files, which are also in capital letters, like Gaster's dialogue. Adding on to that, the enemy has some weird dialogue. Some of it is not worth paying attention to, but some is just really weird. When encountered, it says this: "You've come again to this wonderful place. Now tear off the mask beneath your face." This dialogue implies that Chris has been to the Dark Worlds before, perhaps not literally, as we know from the new egg rooms and other details in the game. Chris has gone through an extremely traumatic situation. It makes sense that they would try to escape from it using imagination. Considering the themes of growing up and leaving your childhood behind in this game, it could be possible that Chris coped with whatever happened with their old toys and things they did as a kid, just to feel a bit of that comfort before everything went wrong. They imagined being in a world where they could escape from all these problems and not think about them for a little while. Adding on to that, the Rudinns seem to know Chris very well, keeping in mind the jabs from the egg room Rudinns. The G-Body literally saying "tear off the mask beneath your face" makes it feel like the Rudinn knows that Chris is possessed by the player, as the Soul is quite literally a mask beneath their face. The chat dialogue seems strange, but it's really just saying "I am your enemy." Other than that, the text that comes up after you act on it treats the enemy like some kind of vessel. It seems like this enemy also has ties to Gaster due to sharing some knowledge and all the vessel relations, as well as it literally being called G-Body, which is in full caps, and it's G-Body. Keeping these points in mind, it further cements the idea that the Rudinns are linked to Gaster. But what's the point of these enemies having ties to Gaster? I think this might be another hint about the Blue Rudinn and the Flying Aces. It could be a hint about how the Rudinns have some relevance to the story. In fact, some points I explain about the dialogues of these enemies helps us know a little more about Chris's life, in my opinion. Next, in chapters 2 and 3, we have Echidna. The word Echidna means Mother of Monsters. Its code seems to be an early version of the enemies in Deltarune, and to encounter it, you need to modify the code a bit. When encountered, the encounter dialogue says, "It is known." This might seem creepy at first, but it's actually just the dialogue that pops up for any enemy that doesn't have a starting dialogue. Maybe it's a play on how you would only encounter something like this when you're actively trying to find it, hence knowing about it. This enemy might be a reference to Akidna and Homestuck. I will try to explain who that is and why as simply as I can. Homestuck is a webcomic in which a group of kids play a game called Suburb. They basically get sucked into this game and their goal is to create a new universe. In Homestuck, when each hero enters a medium, which is basically a separate realm, each of them has a planet to themselves. Each planet has its respective denizen, which is a powerful, usually snake-like creature. The denizens are crucial to each hero's personal quest. The heroes always have to face their denizens for their personal quest. The denizens present a pretty difficult choice to their heroes. The choices they give pertain to mortality. Either the hero must take a risk or kill the denizen. Each hero in Homestuck has a title that consists of a class and an aspect. The aspect can be thought of as an element, and the class is the way the hero uses this element. Which denizen is assigned to a character might be related to the hero's title, although it's not fully confirmed. Akidna is an extremely important denizen in Homestuck, if not the most important. She seems to be heavily linked to heroes with the space aspect. The space aspect is related to creation and propagation. It's crucial to have a space player in a session if you want to win, as they play a huge part in creating the Genesis frog, which holds a universe the players wanted to make. In every successful session, at least those we have seen in Homestuck, Akidna has played a very important role. She helped the players of her sessions make their Genesis frogs and released them. Now, how does this fit into Deltarune's, and how does it relate to the Rudinns? If you've looked into the things that Toby liked, you realize that there's a lot of little references to them in his games. A popular example is the Penumbra Phantasm motif, which is from a song that Toby made for Homestuck. It has appeared in Asriel's songs, The Holy, and possibly even My Castletown. Another example is when Ralsei tells us about how the Titan has been here the whole time. This could potentially be a reference to Homestuck too, as the final boss of it was omnipresent through some funny universal shenanigans. He wasn't exactly always there, but due to something happening in another timeline, he became present throughout every possible universe and timeline in Homestuck. He used Megalovania, which is a song that he made for an Earthbound ROM hack, and one of the check dialogues for a prototype enemy in Deltarune's is susceptible to Brain Shock, which is a status effect in Earthbound. I'll get to that enemy later. Considering Akidna's link to the space aspect and creation, maybe the naming of this enemy is yet another hint at the Rudinns' link with Gaster. But that seems a little lackluster. Maybe there's more we can deduct from this possible connection? Maybe the Rudinn from Castletown might gain relevancy in a future chapter, preparing us for the Roaring? Maybe it could fight us and give us a special item, or it could give us a hint to find something greater. This is all just a bunch of speculation though. There's not enough evidence to truly say something, but if something like this happened, it would be super cool. Wait. You know how each secret boss has a special laugh? You know what the Castletown Rudinn says? Oh ho. That's technically a laugh. A special one. No other Rudinn or character does that. Queen does have a similar laugh, but it's not the same. I'm not crazy! In Chapter 4, in place of Echidna's code, we have a new enemy. It's called Terotaru Bazu. I'm sorry if that's the wrong pronunciation. I kinda struggle with this stuff. It appears to be a Baltazard, but when it attacks, sometimes it takes on the appearance of a Rudinn ranger. It also has the same attacks as a Rudinn. According to Wikipedia, Terotaru Bazu is a small handmade doll which is hung outside doors and windows in hopes of sunny weather. It looks quite similar to the angel dolls in Deltarune's. The literal translation of Terotaru Bazu is Shine Shine Monk. This could be yet another Gaster Rudinn connection, and I'll explain why. A monk is a man from a group of men who give up all desire for their religion and live simple and peaceful lives. Now, this doesn't have to fit exactly into Deltarune's, but from this we do get the theme of worship and religion. The organics in Deltarune's are very interesting characters. They seem to know a lot about Deltarune's, and they're always questioning things as well as giving us hints to the lore of the game. A captain describes them as old scholars, grayed by research forgotten. Sounds similar to a certain someone, does it not? In a room in the first sanctuary, we find a lot of petrified organics. Upon interaction we get the dialogue, its expression is frozen in worship. As we know, a few gunners in Undertale were called Gaster followers in the code, which is an interesting wording for them as the word followers in this kind of context sounds religious. An organic in the Asgore prophecy room seems to know about the egg room, and it even seems to mention the Rudinns. It says, "Treasure? There's no treasure, only experience. The other side of your mind. Did you miss something there?" If you say yes, it says the following. "Liar, your hands are shining. You took and made. Tickets and cards drawn in gray. A trace, repeated. It's also clear." Experience is something that shapes our mind and our being. The real treasure lies in what we learn from our experiences. The other side of your mind is a Susie's dark world, but it could also be thought of as experiences Chris has been trying to forget about, since Susie's dark world had a bunch of organics who hinted at what happened to the children, who are heavily implied to be Chris and Des. Also, the egg room in her dark world takes the form of a therapist visit. Their hands shining could be a reference to how they couldn't wash the graphite off of their hands. As for the part saying, "you took and made," that could be about them drawing. Tickets and cards drawn in gray could be the ticket to Man Country and the Rudinns living there, while a trace repeated could be about how Chris kept sketching in the egg room. Adding on to that, the Rudinns literally say "shine, shine" in their battle. So, all those points are why the naming of this enemy could be another hint at the Rudinns and Gaster being connected. But why? Why do these stupid enemies have so much in common with Gaster? Again, considering all these links, I feel like a Rudinn is gonna help us out with something in a later chapter. Either that or it's some kind of device for something. Maybe the Castle Town Rudinn is a device for Gaster to talk to us within the game or something? As of now, it seems that he can only interact with us when we are in realms in between the worlds of the game and our own. That is, he can only interact with us when we've died and before the game starts. That's not all for Terotaru Bazu. The tradition is said to have originated from an old Chinese tradition called Saoqing. I'm sorry again if the pronunciation is wrong. Saoqing, translated literally, means cloud-sweeping lady or clear sky maiden. She was often invoked to sweep away clouds and bring fair weather, especially during important festivals, weddings, or farming periods, according to Wikipedia. It also says that the most well-known legend associated with Saoqing says that a girl sacrificed herself to save her city from a terrible storm. Does this all not sound similar to something we're setting up in Deltarune? The girl in this story has a lot of angelic imagery to her. Who else has angelic imagery? Noelle. If the prophecy demands a sacrifice to save the worlds, it's possible that this enemy is hinting at what's going to happen next in the Snowgrave route. My personal prediction for Chapter 5 is that we are going to get the start of the Roaring, by perhaps around the end of it. We might be preparing Noelle to get braver to sacrifice herself to save the worlds. We might even get the ending of the Snowgrave route in Chapter 5, looking at the one ominous page with the numbers on it. Why do these enemies have so many links? We also have another enemy in Chapter 4 called Multiboss example. These guys don't seem lore relevant, they seem to purely be a test for something. If you try killing one of them, another one will heal it with milk, much like Sweet Cap and Cakes. The interesting thing about these enemies is the fact that they aren't in Chapter 2, despite seeming like a task for Sweet Cap and Cakes. They also have a second fight with Controller. I think these enemies might be a very early test for the Mike's boss fight, considering there's multiple of them and a fight test with Controller. Maybe at this point, Toby hadn't thought of changing up the UI for this fight. Another point possibly supporting this thought is how the Mikes don't have any hurt sprites. Perhaps the Deltarune team thought of the mechanics of the Mike's fight while testing with the Rudinns. There's also an enemy in both chapters 3 and 4 called Bullet Tester enemy. This one also doesn't have much importance to the lore because it seems to be a pretty broken fight, probably purely for testing purposes. Finally, I'd like to mention enemy. There's not much to say about this one. Its code is pretty much identical to that of Akidna and G-bodies. It's pretty similar to G-body too, except its check dialog says susceptible to brain shock, which is a type of status effect in Earthbound that makes the enemy start to feel strange and causes them to start attacking their allies. This is quite funny, as Rudinns seem to listen to orders very easily. Does this mean the knight will make everyone in Castletown turn against us? Seriously though, Queen controlled Burly with her wire and made him attack us. It's possible that in a future battle, maybe one of our party members or allies will be coerced to join the enemy side. It is also treated like some kind of vessel through the act dialogues, but other than that, there's not much to say about it other than what has already been covered by my explanation of the G-body. And I'd like to mention, I really like how it wiggles and sways around like that. It's kind of creepy too. Also, there's another point I want to say about the prototypes. Most of these enemies decrease your TP when you graze a certain attack and give you negative TP if you go below 0. Negative TP in-game is something you can only achieve in Javel's boss fight if you use Hypnosis on him with 49% TP. As we know, the secret bosses all have knowledge about the prophecy and the world. The gun and rudin stocks have never been higher. Hello, future me here. Negative TP is actually achievable because of the weird way that TP is calculated in the code. And in theory, you can get it on any enemy ever, but I've only seen people get it on Spamton and Tenna, besides from Javel so far. Just wanted to correct that. Clover's Rudinn friend. There is a Rudinn in the forest in Chapter 1, standing in a spot a bit to the side of the main path. This spot is shaped very similarly to Gaster's room in Undertale. When you talk to the Rudinn, it says your son Braken is thinking about what to get for its friend Clover's birthday. It says her interests are sports, cute boys, and trees. Aren't these interests similar to what we've seen about Des? She seems to have loved sports from what we've seen in her room. She has a bunch of sporty things that she seemed to love bats, especially hitting Chris with them. She might also have been the one to write the lyrics of Raise Up Your Bat, and she seems to have something with baseballs due to the bat stuff. There's also a bunch of baseballs in her closet. There's baseballs in Clover's party, which are actually soccer balls that have been painted over. Is Jockington the Roaring Knight? As for the part about cute boys, it is hinted that there's something going on between Das and Azriel. I'm not a big fan of canonizing ships or whatever, but she seemed to wear Azriel's clothes often, as Noelle mentions Das wiping her tears away with Azriel's jacket, and she also has a sweater in her closet. Moreover, she has his retainers in a box in her room. If the knight is truly Des, that also provides more evidence for this being true, as the Dark Worlds are influenced by the will of the Lightners that create them, and Cyber City had this very cliché theme of romance throughout it. Trees are something that are heavily linked to Des's disappearance. The trees we see in Clover's birthday party are literally pine trees, which are usually used to celebrate Christmas and thus heavily linked to the Holiday family. Des is also implied to have gone missing in the forest around hometown, probably around the shelter. Now, there's not much that can be concluded from this possible parallel, besides from maybe a hint about Des's life, and further cementing how goddamn suspicious these stupid things are. What's wrong with them? Trash can Rudinn. In Chapter 1, there's a Rudinn which was beat into a trash can by Susie to convince it to let her out of her cell. It doesn't look like there's anything interesting about this Rudinn, but if you focus closely, there's a bunch of stains on the trash can. You could argue that this is just a bunch of filth on the trash can, but every other trash can in the game is totally clean. The stains are also a bright minty color, and no gross filth would look that tasty. You could also say this is the Rudinn's blood, but darkness don't seem to bleed. So, what could this be? It's paint. Remember how I said that the Castletown Rudinn might be disguising itself? It's possible that this Rudinn is the same one. It might be painting itself to blend in with the rest of the Rudinns, but how the hell did it get paint on itself? It's an object. Well, it probably goes by the same logic as the mice disguising themselves. Despite being objects in the light world, they're properly managing to disguise themselves, putting on and taking off their outfits when needed. There's also probably some last Thursdaysm going on in here too. Maybe the rudin in the light world is a card which got sun bleached as green fades to blue in the sun. This could be a metaphor for how having such knowledge heavily changes the darkness as we've seen with Javel and Spanton. Maybe it painting itself as a lore made up for it through imagination or something. I'm honestly super excited to see where this blue rudin stuff goes, even if I'm extremely wrong, which I probably am. And then Toby throws all my observations at my face and shuts the door on me. I don't mind. The King of Diamonds. The King of Diamonds, along with the Kings of Hearts and Clubs, are trapped in a cage, which has a symbol on it, similar to the angel in the Deltarune's symbol, but with a heart between the wings, and it says that nobody talks to it. Is anyone really talking to Chris? Have they really made any real friends, or are all their friends not actually their friends, but they're ours because we are the ones making decisions? Anyways, in Chapter 2, the kings in the cages are dressed up as cats, while the animals are dressed up as kings. The King of Diamonds compares the prison to a hell, saying that they've come to love this hellish place where they dress up as animals. Could this be a parallel to Asgore? The King of Diamonds already has some similarities to Asgore. He personifies his treasure, asking if it's unharmed. Maybe his treasure is the Rudinns, as he asks if his diamonds are alright. And the Rudinns are diamond cards in the light world. Asgore personifies his flowers and is implied to talk to them for support. There's a prophecy panel about Asgore, saying the flower man trapped in Asylum. Asylum is the protection granted by a state to someone who has left their country as a refugee. This does sound similar to the situation Asgore is in, as he seems to have been granted relief by Carol to some extent. An asylum can also be thought of as a place of protection from this definition. Asgore has made up an asylum in his flower shop, within which he is trapped. This is similar to the Diamond King in Chapter 4, where he says he was the only one serious about staying in the cage, meaning that he had just trapped himself in the cage inside for a self-made reason. Anyways, recalling the fact that the King of Diamonds was pretending to be a cat and stuck within a cage of his own making, could this be a hint to Friend having a big role in Chapter 5? Asgore was talking to some old friend in this segment of Chapter 4. He also mentioned having a black shard, which could be a shadow crystal. Asgore could just be talking to himself, the conspiracy board in front of him, or the shard when he says old friend though. But it's possible that Friend might be helping Asgore out with something, or tricking him into something. Miscellaneous ruden stuff. This portion is just for random stuff inside or outside of the game, which I didn't understand where to put. I'll start off with the wackiest thing. If you invert the colors of the green and blue Rudinns, you get pink and yellow. This is a link to Friend. Are you guys seeing this? The Rudinns turn pink and yellow. Oh my god. The Rudinns know way too much. Oh no. The blue Rudinns are gonna turn into Friend in Chapter 5. We're all doomed. It's gonna kill everyone. It's literally gonna kill everyone. It's gonna escape into the light world and kill everyone. Again, I don't know. The Ranger inverts to a light cyan, but who cares? They're also all red, green, and blue, just like Gaster, Sans, and Papyrus. How much deeper can it get? In the 10th anniversary live streams for Undertale, Toby said Sans, the song, was originally for a bunch of Rudinns in a gym, except they were reading, and one of them said that the brain is the strongest muscle of your body. Well, little guys, you sure are giving my brain a real workout with how goddamn weird you all are. The song is called Muscle.org in Deltarune'S files. Rudinns have a snake-like design, and Friend also seems to have some snake-like qualities, considering that one tweet where Tammy says, a cat's tail is actually a snake in disguise. And the Titan has a dialogue where it says, the darkness gave a long gaze that slithered like a snake. There are also weird snake-looking things in Queen's basement where we see Friend in-game for the first time and fight Spanton. Oh my god. The blue rudin is literally gonna turn into Friend in Chapter 5 and kill everyone. I'm not even kidding. Actually, I'm kidding. Haha. In Ross's explanation of the roaring, a rudin shows up. This probably isn't too surprising, nor holds any theoretical value because a Lancer-looking Darkner is also beside it. Rudins also show up in Rawls' explanation of the Dark Worlds, but so do Queen, Lancer, and Hathi. Sometimes Rudinn says I'm just a normal person during its battle. No the hell you aren't, nor are you a person. Why does it have a sense of being? It isn't a person, it's a Darkner, an object! There are also a bunch of Rudinns before the Forest Maze, which is kind of a Das and Chris parallel with Susie and Lancer if you're crazy enough. But I probably sound like a lunatic saying this, and there's not much to say about this fact. Anyways, that's it for my crazy Rudinn rant. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. It would be cool if you shared it or something. I don't know. I really like Rudinns. Bye.